there was a case back in the 80s called the Finders case. This first came to light in U.S. News and World Report and earlier the Washington Post. It seems that a group of children, little children, tiny children, up to the age of 6 or 7, were found wandering around in a park in Tallahassee, Florida. They were filthy and unkempt and in poor condition. They didn't even know their own names, and people living around the park called the police. Police found 2 men who claimed to be the children's guardians, and these men were promptly arrested on child neglect charges. The children and the 2 men said that the children were being taken, and this is where my blood ran cold, to a school for gifted students in Monterrey, Mexico. In Mexico. This was in 1985 this happened. It began to be reported in 86, 87. The children and the men were linked to a group called the Finders, a commune in the District of Columbia. There was a police search of a home in a warehouse where they found bags of evidence that contained photographs, computer records, other documents. They found an altar in the warehouse, and they found jars of urine and feces. They found pictures of adults and children together participating in the disembowelment and dismemberment of goats, as if in some satanic ritual. They found the children, pictures of the children, suggestive pictures of the children. And in fact, the head and skin of a goat involved in these things were discovered by Virginia State Police during a search of a farm belonging to the Finders. So there's little question that there was something dreadful going on here. There was evidence that the Finders had sent a telex to Hong Kong attempting the purchase of a child. There were books or papers showing instructions about how to get children from parents, how to buy children. In other words, these children had been not kidnapped, but voluntarily given away or given up by their parents. The customs agents, U.S. Customs, demanded a full-scale inquiry into this business of smuggling of children. But something happened then. The Central Intelligence Agency intervened and invoked the National Security Act and quashed the investigation. There is some evidence that the CIA admitted to owning the Finders as a front for domestic computer training operations, but that it had gone sour. Well, if it had gone sour, why not let the investigation proceed? All reports concerning the Finders case were and are classified secret. Secret. Representative Tom Lewis from Florida has asked some questions which remain unanswered. Could our government have something to do with this Finders organization and had turned their backs on these children? That's what all the evidence points to, and there's a lot of evidence. I can tell you this, he said. We've got a lot of people scrambling, and that wouldn't be happening if there was nothing here. Now, that was in 1993. Since then, this has disappeared completely beneath the radar. It's gone. The Finders are presumably fine. Nothing ever happened to anybody. Who knows what becomes of these children? How many children are involved and what is being done to them and with them all over this world? We can't control what other countries and people may do outside of the United States, but the United States of America must, for the sake of its own honor and its moral value as an institution of government, own up to these abuses, make them public, and apologize for them in the same way that the United States apologized to the victims of the plutonium experiment.
Informed consent was withheld. Americans were kept in the dark about the effects of what was being done to them. The deception extended beyond the test subjects themselves to encompass their families and the American people as a whole. For these experiments were kept secret, and they were shrouded not for a compelling reason of national security, but for the simple fear of embarrassment, and that was wrong. So today, on behalf of another generation of American leaders and another generation of American citizens, the United States of America offers a sincere apology to those of our citizens who were subjected to these experiments, to their families, and to their communities.
The essential problem with all of these childhood memories, when a mind is 5, 6, 7 years old, it sees the world very, very differently from the mind of a person who is older, because it lacks a great deal of contextual information. And this has given organizations like the False Memory Syndrome Foundation the opportunity to throw up a smokescreen around all childhood memories of abuse and say it never happened, or most of it never happened. We'll talk about the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, which has some CIA-related connections, I believe. An organization called the False Memory Syndrome Foundation was founded in 1992 by two psychologists or psychiatrists, Pamela and Peter Freyd, with the support and encouragement of therapists Helida Wakefield and Ralph Unterwager. A group of professionals joined with the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, and thousands of parents support it who have been accused by their children of child abuse, as indeed the founders, the Freuds, were accused by their daughter, Jennifer Freyd, of child abuse. They were accused of abusing her. Pamela Freyd has always denied this. Her husband, Peter Freyd, has admitted that he was as an alcoholic and that he may have done inappropriate things with their daughter. Pamela Freyd is herself a PhD psychologist, and she's written a book called Betrayal Trauma, The Logic of Forgetting Childhood Abuse, which basically outlines a theory of why abuse like this would be buried in amnesia because of trauma, that the traumatic amnesia actually does exist. Now, according to the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, the controversy is not whether or not children are abused. Child abuse is a serious social problem that requires our attention. Neither is the controversy about whether or not people may remember past abuse. There are many reasons why people may remember or may not remember something. Childhood amnesia, physical trauma, drugs, or the natural decay of stored information. The controversy is about the accuracy of claims of recovered, repressed memories of abuse. This is what the False Memory Syndrome Foundation says it is about. But what it would appear more to be about is protecting people who have been accused of abuse or are themselves abusers. I mentioned Ralph Unterwager. He was one of the original therapists involved in this organization. In an interview in the magazine Pedoca, the Journal of Pedophilia, Unterwager was asked the question, according to Jennifer Freyd in her book Betrayal Trauma, is choosing pedophilia for you a responsible choice for the individual? His response was this: certainly it is responsible. What I have been struck by, as I have come to know more and more and understand people who choose pedophilia, is they let themselves be too much defined by others. That is usually an essentially negative definition. Pedophiles spend a lot of time and energy defending their choice. I don't think that a pedophile needs to do that. Pedophiles can boldly and courageously affirm what they choose. They can say that what they want is to find the best way to love. I am also a theologian, and as a theologian, I believe it is God's will that there be closeness and intimacy, unity of the flesh between people. A pedophile can say, this closeness is possible for me within the choices as I have made. Polita Wakefield said, it would be nice if someone could get some kind of big research grant to do a longitudinal study of, let's say, 100 12-year-old boys in relationships with loving pedophiles. Whoever was doing the study would have to follow them up at 5-year intervals for 20 years. In other words, this shows a degree of approval of pedophilia from founders of this organization, and an accusation that is out there, although denied, that the two founding members of it were themselves involved in child abuse. An accusation made by a distinguished academic, their own daughter. Also on the board of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation were a number of very highly placed individuals, as well as for a time, James Randi, the amazing Randi, was on that board. And you will recall, or maybe not, some years ago, some audio tapes surfaced of James Randi describing his genitals in detail to what sounded to be a teenage boy. He was confronted with this material and said that he was actually working on an undercover police investigation and could say nothing more about it. But it would seem to me that it needs to be explained very, very carefully, and that police organization needs to be identified, and that I don't believe has ever happened. So you have an organization in the False Memory Syndrome Foundation that is, to say the least, colored with a brush of uncertainty. What are they really about? What are they trying to do? Is there legitimacy to it? And what about the government connections of some of the people involved? We need to know. We need to know whether or not this is a legitimate organization. But more than that, we don't need an organization that is out there claiming that memories of abuse cannot be hidden, or if hidden, rather, cannot be excavated, because it simply is not true. Memories of abuse can be excavated, and they can be recovered. And not only that, careful investigation, which is what we need the most, can be done into organizations like the Finders, into the numerous people who have made claims like I've made, and some of them are much more extensive and fulsome than mine, and to see if there is any sign that the federal government in any form has committed this kind of abuse against children for whatever reasons of creating split personalities or whatever they may have been doing. Who knows what their ideas may have been? Whatever their ideas were and are, they're absolutely unacceptable, and it's not an acceptable activity for anyone in or out of any government to invade the psyche of a child in this way. It's absolutely unacceptable, whether it has a larger good, bad, or indifferent result. It is not acceptable. It's something we cannot do. We need an investigator on the level of Eileen Welsome, who won the Pulitzer Prize for her extraordinary book, The Plutonium Experiments, which led to a presidential apology to the victims of those experiments. Children have almost certainly been victimized as well. We need that to be known publicly. We need the damage to be repaired as far as possible, to be contained, and the abuse to be admitted. This is a first step in a level of moral cleansing that is going to go, I think, a whole lot deeper than ever, even than that.